My name is Emily Carter. I am 46 years old. I live in a modest two-bedroom apartment in Westbridge, a town most people only notice when they need a hospital bed or an obituary printed. For the past 19 years, I have worked as a night facilities technician at St. Margaret's Medical Center. Most people just call me the janitor. The night my life finally cracked open, I was on my knees, scrubbing dried blood out of the grout outside ICU room 3, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. The blood was already cold. It always was by the time I got there. Nobody ever noticed the blood until it bothered them. Doctors saved lives. Nurses ran. Administrators gave speeches. And I erased what was left behind. I wiped my gloves on my pants and checked the message. It was from my husband. My parents are done pretending. Tomorrow will be easier for everyone. That was it. No explanation. No apology. Just a quiet execution notice wrapped in polite language. Let me be clear about something before this goes any further. I did not marry into a poor family. I did not marry into a kind one either. My father-in-law was a celebrated surgeon. His name was engraved on plaques, donation walls, and a surgical wing I helped rewire after a flood no one ever thanked me for fixing. My mother-in-law chaired charity boards and smiled for cameras like empathy was a skill she had perfected in rehearsals. My husband worked upstairs, wore clean scrubs, and told people I worked maintenance, the way someone might confess to owning a leaky roof. They never said my job was shameful. They just treated it like it was contagious. At St. Margaret's, I worked nights because nights were quieter. Machines told the truth at night. Pipes groaned when they were about to fail. Backup generators hummed with a pitch that told me whether they would survive a storm. I knew that building the way you know your own body. Where it hurt. Where it lied. Where it would finally give out if pushed too hard. At home, I was quieter. I cooked. I cleaned. I listened to my in-laws talk about fundraising galas and medical innovation while I fixed their broken dishwasher with parts I bought myself because it was easier than asking. They called me reliable. Reliable is what you call something you expect to hold without ever checking if it is cracking. The hospital intercom crackled overhead. A nurse called for environmental services, sharp and impatient. I finished the last pass with the mop and stood slowly, my knees protesting like they always did at the end of a shift. The smell of disinfectant clung to my skin. It never really came off. I carried it home every morning like a second shadow. At 6:12 a.m., I clocked out. At 6:47 a.m., I was back in the building, not as an employee, but as a wife invited to a family breakfast in the executive dining room upstairs. My mother-in-law liked to stage important conversations over fresh fruit and forced smiles. She believed confrontation tasted better with yogurt parfaits. I changed out of my work uniform and into a gray cardigan with a loose thread at the sleeve. It had survived 3 winters, 2 layoffs that were not mine, and 1 charity dinner where I was mistaken for catering staff and asked to refill a water pitcher. I did it, out of habit. When I walked into that dining room, the conversation stopped. My father-in-law folded his newspaper with surgical precision. My mother-in-law set her spoon down like she had practiced the movement. My husband would not meet my eyes. They did not waste time. Emily, my mother-in-law said gently, the way people speak to animals before they are put down. This situation has gone on long enough. My father-in-law cleared his throat. It is not personal. It is about alignment. Alignment. That word always showed up right before someone decided you were no longer useful. They talked about image, about reputation, about how difficult it was for my husband to advance when people asked questions about me. They never raised their voices. They did not need to. They had practiced this kind of dismissal their whole lives. Then my husband finally spoke. Tomorrow, he said, staring at the table, the hospital is restructuring. Facilities is being outsourced. You should hear it from us first. I nodded. I already knew. What they did not know was this. While they were planning my removal, they were standing on ground that still legally belonged to me. They did not know that the land beneath St. Margaret's Medical Center, the contracts that kept its power running, the signatures that allowed its generators to breathe during blackouts, all traced back to one name, mine. They thought I was just the woman who cleaned the floors after miracles and mistakes. They forgot I was also the one who made sure the building never collapsed on top of them. And tomorrow, when they handed me a folder and asked for my keys, they were going to learn the most expensive lesson of their lives. Some things, once returned, do not come back quietly. The email arrived at 8:04 a.m., exactly 12 minutes after I finished reattaching a loose oxygen line in the West Corridor. No subject line, just a calendar invite. HR sync mandatory. I stared at my phone while the hum of the machines settled back into their normal rhythm. The ICU did not care about restructuring. It never did. It only cared that everything kept breathing. I wiped my hands, peeled off my gloves, and checked the room number again. Wrong floor. Wrong wing. Wrong life. I had been in that building since before half the executives learned how to pronounce infrastructure. I had watched interns cry in stairwells, surgeons scream at printers, and donors faint when the power flickered during tours. I fixed all of it. Quietly. Without documentation. Because if I documented every near disaster, they would have had to admit how close they came to collapse. At 8:30 a.m., I walked into conference room C. HR had already set the tone. Glass walls. Frosted logo. A carafe of water no one touched. Haley sat at the table, spine straight, hands folded, eyes rehearsed. She was young enough to believe policy was the same thing as justice. Next to her sat a man from legal I had never met. He had the posture of someone who never lifted anything heavier than a pen. "Emily," Haley said, smiling. "Thank you for coming." She gestured to the chair across from her. I sat. They did not ask how I was. They never do when the outcome is already decided. Haley slid a folder toward me. Thick, white, impersonal. "We are undergoing a strategic restructuring," she said. "Facilities operations will be transitioned to a third-party provider effective immediately." Immediately. 19 years collapsed into one word. The lawyer cleared his throat. "This is not a reflection of your performance. This is a business decision." I opened the folder. 3 months severance. Health coverage through the end of the quarter. A non-disclosure agreement thick enough to suffocate any memory I had of the place. My title was wrong. My middle initial was wrong. They misspelled the street on my address. I closed it slowly. "You are requesting my badge and keys today," the lawyer added, voice flat, "along with any company property in your possession." Company property. I looked at Haley. "Are you sure?" I asked. She blinked. "Yes." I nodded. I reached into my pocket and placed my badge on the table. The plastic was cracked at the corner. I had dropped it during a blackout 5 years earlier while rerouting power manually so the neonatal unit would not lose heat. Then I reached into my bag. I laid the keys out one by one, 11 of them, labeled, worn, some older than Haley. The room went quiet. "That is a lot of keys," Haley said. "They add up," I replied. The lawyer shifted. "Are those all?" I looked at him. Yes, that was not a lie. It just was not the whole truth. I stood. "Thank you for your time," I said. Haley opened her mouth, maybe to offer something sympathetic, maybe to absolve herself. I did not wait to hear it. The hallway outside felt narrower than usual, like the building itself was holding its breath. I walked past the maintenance closet I had stocked myself when budget approvals took too long. Past the breaker panel I had rewired after lightning took out half the east wing. Past the emergency generator room that only ran because I personally negotiated the fuel contract when procurement forgot. No one stopped me. They never do until something breaks. Outside, the air was sharp, honest. I stood in the parking lot for a long moment, listening to my heartbeat like it was recalibrating. Then I drove home. I did not cry. I made tea. I fed the cat. I changed out of my work clothes and opened the hall closet I had not touched in years. Behind old winter coats and a vacuum that screamed when you turned it on sat a steel lockbox. The key was taped to the back of a framed photo from my first year at the hospital. Back when the building still smelled like drywall and ambition, I unlocked it. Inside were documents no one ever asked for back. Original site lease, utility contracts, city permits, amendments signed during temporary emergencies that never quite ended. I spread them across the kitchen table. The lease was dated 19 years ago. The ink had faded, but the name at the bottom was still clear. Emily Carter. I remembered that day. The hospital had been days from losing the property. No credit. No lender willing to touch them. The board panicking behind closed doors. My father-in-law pacing like a god being told no. They needed someone stable, someone with credit, someone willing to sign quietly. They asked me because they assumed I would never use it. I flipped to the renewal clause. My finger stopped. The language was specific, brutally so. Written notice required 60 days prior to expiration. I checked the date. Then I checked my calendar. Then I laughed. Once. Sharp. They missed it. Not by hours. By days. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. For years they told me I was replaceable. They were wrong. They had replaced the person. They forgot about the signature. I gathered the documents and slid them back into the lockbox. Then I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had not used in a long time. "Lenny," I said when he answered. "Do you still practice real estate law?" There was a pause. Then a low whistle. "Oh," he said. "That building." "Yes," I replied. "That building." Silence. Then, "Do they know?" I looked down at the folder still sitting on my kitchen counter. The severance. The NDA. The neat little ending they had prepared for me. No, I said calmly. They just asked for their keys. I hung up. For the first time since that meeting, my hands were steady. They wanted everything back. They were about to get it. Lenny did not ask many questions. He never did when something smelled expensive. We met the next morning at a small office wedged between a dental lab and a bail bonds place downtown. The sign outside still had peeling letters from the last tenant, but the coffee was strong and the walls were thick. That mattered more. He read the lease without interrupting me, page by page, amendment by amendment. His expression changed slowly, like a weather front moving in. They never removed your name, he said finally. No, I replied. They never thought they needed to. He tapped the renewal clause with his pen. They missed the notice window. Clean miss. No ambiguity. I nodded. And, he continued, flipping to another section, they sublet part of the parking structure to a private imaging contractor without disclosure. I leaned forward. That was never approved. No, he said. And it violates 2 clauses. Material breach. The words settled between us like something heavy being placed gently on a table. I did not smile. What does that give me? I asked. Lenny leaned back. Options. I liked that word. It sounded like oxygen. First, he said, you can notify them. Give them a chance to cure. That would be generous. I pictured Haley's smile, the lawyer's flat voice, my husband staring at the table. No, I said. He nodded. Second, you can terminate. 30 days. Clean. Legal. And after that, you can lease it to someone else. I had already done the math. St. Margaret sat on land every developer wanted. Downtown. Zoned medical. Infrastructure already in place. Power capacity that could handle a small city if you knew where to look. I have someone, I said. Lenny raised an eyebrow. You move fast. I moved prepared. The new tenant was a regional healthcare group expanding urgent care clinics. They had money. They had lawyers who read everything twice. And most importantly, they respected paperwork. We met that afternoon. They did not care about my job title. They cared about signatures, about timelines, about access. I gave them all 3. They offered nearly triple what St. Margaret's paid. I did not negotiate. I did not need to. While contracts were drafted and emails moved quietly, my former life carried on upstairs without me. That night my husband called. I let it ring, then my mother-in-law, then my father-in-law. I answered on the 4th attempt. Emily, my husband said, voice tight. There has been a misunderstanding. No, I replied. There has been a pattern. He exhaled. We heard you have been speaking to legal counsel. I smiled faintly. So have you. We want to talk, my father-in-law cut in, taking the phone. As a family. Families do not outsource each other, I said. They talk first. Silence. Whatever you think you are doing, he continued. This will damage a lot of people. I looked at the lockbox on my table, at the name on the lease. I am not damaging anything, I said calmly. I am responding. He scoffed. You are being emotional. That one almost made me laugh. I am being precise, I corrected. There is a difference. I hung up. The next morning, HR emailed me. Subject, property confirmation. They wanted written confirmation that I had returned all company property. Keys, badges, documents, digital access. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I replied, yes, including the documents you forgot were still mine. I copied legal. Facilities, Haley. Then I attached the lease, all of it. I imagined Haley opening the file, scrolling, frowning, reaching the signature line. My name. The phone rang again. This time it was the hospital CEO. I answered. What is going on? He demanded. I leaned against the counter, steady. You fired the person who signed your ground. That is absurd, he snapped. We assumed. That is the problem, I said. You assumed. You are threatening an entire institution, he said. No, I replied. I'm ending an agreement. He tried another angle. Do you have any idea what this will do to your husband's career? I thought of the breakfast table, the yogurt parfaits, the way they spoke about me like a liability. He will be fine, I said. He aligns well. The call ended shortly after. By the end of the week, the termination notice was drafted. 30 days. No extensions. No negotiations. Lenny filed it with the city, with the property manager, with the court. I signed where indicated. The pen felt heavier than usual. Not because of doubt, because of gravity. That evening, my in-laws hosted a celebration dinner. I knew because the photos appeared online within minutes. Smiles. Toasts. A caption about resilience and leadership. They had no idea the ground beneath them had an expiration date. 3 days later, the certified notice arrived at the hospital. The receptionist signed for it. Set it aside. No one read it. Not immediately. They were busy preparing for the annual fundraising gala. Banners, donor lists, press releases, a celebration of impact. I watched it all from a distance, quietly. The property manager called me that afternoon. They are asking questions, he said. They should, I replied. They want to meet. They already did, I said. They just did not listen. He hesitated. You understand this will be public? Yes, and permanent. I looked out the window. The street below moved the way it always did. Unconcerned, unaware. So was 19 years, I said. That night, I placed the signed lease transfer into the lockbox, right next to the original. 2 signatures. Same name. Different lives. Tomorrow, the gala invitations would go out, and the clock would start ticking in a room full of people who thought I had already been erased. They were about to learn the cost of forgetting who held the building together. The gala always smelled like money trying to pretend it was compassion. Fresh flowers, polished marble, waiters moving like choreography, all black suits and quiet smiles. A banner stretched across the atrium read, "Celebrating a future of care." I had helped install the lighting for it 3 years ago, adjusting the angle so donors would look 10% kinder in photos. That night I watched from across the street, not because I was afraid to go inside, because I did not need to. Inside, my former life was dressed in its best clothes. My mother-in-law floated from group to group, laughing softly, one hand on a champagne flute, the other on a donor's sleeve. My father-in-law stood near the stage, posture immaculate, nodding at compliments like he was granting favors rather than receiving them. My husband hovered at her side, smiling just enough. They looked untouchable. At 7:12 p.m. the city marshal arrived. No sirens, no shouting, just 2 uniforms, a clipboard, and a fluorescent orange notice folded neatly in a clear sleeve. The kind of color designed to be seen even by people who do not want to look. The marshal spoke to the front desk first. The receptionist frowned, then pointed toward the administrative wing. Someone whispered. Someone else laughed nervously, assuming it was a mistake, a vendor, a misplaced delivery. By 7:18, the CEO was pulled aside. I could see him through the glass, his smile stiffening as he read. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. He read it again, slower. The orange paper did not change. By 7:25, whispers had turned into ripples. Phones came out. Donors leaned closer, curiosity sharpening their expressions. Nothing attracts attention like authority that suddenly looks confused. At 7:30, the marshal affixed the notice to the glass doors leading to the executive offices. Zip ties. Clean. Legal. Notice of termination and demand to vacate. 48 hours. The atrium fell into a silence that felt physical. My mother-in-law was the first to break it. She laughed. A short, bright sound. "This is ridiculous," she said loudly, the way people do when they want everyone to hear their confidence. There must be some error. The marshal did not argue. He never did. He simply handed over the paperwork and asked her to direct him to the authorized representative. The authorized representative was pale. At 7:41, someone finally read the plaintiff line out loud. My name traveled through the crowd like a dropped glass. Emily Carter. Not doctor. Not donor. Not board member. Facilities. The gala did not recover. The CEO attempted damage control. He gestured toward the band, toward the stage, toward the open bar. He spoke quickly, voice too loud, promising answers soon. The donors listened. Then they checked their phones. By 8:03, a local reporter arrived. By 8:10, someone posted a photo of the notice. By 8:22, the story had a headline. Downtown Medical Center faces eviction over lease dispute. They did not use my name in the first version. They would. Inside, the emergency meeting formed in the glass conference room. Blinds half lowered, never enough. Faces tight, hands moving too fast. My husband stood apart. He finally looked like someone realizing the ground was not solid. At 8:37, my phone rang. I answered. "What did you do?" he asked. I leaned against my car, the metal cool against my back. "I stopped doing," I said. "That is the difference." "You cannot do this," he said, voice breaking. "People will get hurt." I closed my eyes. "People were hurt long before tonight," I said quietly. "You just did not see them." "You are destroying everything," he whispered. "No," I replied. "I am letting it stand on its own." The call ended. Inside the gala, the final illusion collapsed. One of the board members shouted. Another tried to leave and was stopped by security, unsure whether to escort or protect. My father-in-law demanded to speak to the property manager, then to the city, then to anyone who would pick up. No one could change the paper. At 9:05, the marshal returned. He spoke calmly, explained the timeline, explained the enforcement. 48 hours to vacate. The donors left in clusters, quiet, uneasy. No one wants to be photographed near failure. Someone knocked over a display table. A glass shattered. A chair scraped loudly across the floor. My mother-in-law sat down for the first time that evening. She looked small. At 9:42, the CEO called me. I answered. "You blindsided us," he said hoarsely. "No," I replied. I responded to being dismissed. "We can fix this," he said quickly. "We can renegotiate. Name your price." I looked through the windshield at the building I had kept alive for nearly 2 decades. "I already did," I said. "You did not read it." Silence. Then softer. "You never wanted this much power." "I never wanted to be invisible," I said. I hung up. At 10:18, the gala officially ended. Early. No speeches. No pledges. The building emptied slowly, like a body realizing it had lost too much blood. Across the street, I watched the lights dim one by one. Not because the power failed. Because someone turned them off. The next morning, the story was everywhere. Not dramatic. Not sensational. Just factual. Lease not renewed. Unauthorized subletting. Legal termination. No villains. No heroes. Just paperwork. At 8:03 a.m., the marshal returned. This time with tape. The fluorescent orange sealed the doors. I stood across the street, coffee in hand, as staff wheeled boxes out. Computers. Chairs. Whiteboards still covered in half-erased optimism. My husband walked out last. He stopped when he saw me. We did not speak. He looked at the notice. At the building. At me. Then he nodded once. It was not forgiveness. It was recognition. By noon, the new tenant's banner went up on the side of the building. Different name. Same walls. I turned away. I had nothing left to prove. The building did not look angry once it was empty. It looked tired. By the third day, the last moving truck pulled away, leaving faint tire marks and a few broken leaves pressed into the concrete. Someone had forgotten a box of disposable gloves by the loading dock. I recognized the brand. Cheap. The kind procurement always bought because they assumed hands were replaceable. I stood across the street longer than I needed to. The new tenants arrived quietly. No ceremony. No speeches. They unlocked the doors with their own keys, walked the halls with clipboards, asked practical questions. Power capacity, water pressure, load limits. They thanked the property manager. They thanked the city inspector. They did not thank me. They did not need to. That afternoon, I packed the last box from my apartment. Not because I was forced to, but because I was ready. I donated most of what I owned. I kept what mattered. Papers, photos, the lockbox. My husband did not call again. Neither did my in-laws. Their silence was not peaceful. It was heavy. The kind that settles when people realize there is nothing left to argue with. A week later, I received an email from the hospital board. No apology, no accusation. Just a formal notice acknowledging the termination and a request for confirmation that all matters were closed. I replied with one sentence. Confirmed. Then I archived the thread. I started sleeping better. The kind of sleep where your shoulders finally drop sometime after midnight. The kind where you do not dream about alarms or flickering lights or someone shouting your name from a hallway you cannot reach in time. On my last evening in the apartment, I hung the one thing I had saved, a small brass hook. I placed it on the wall beside a framed photo of my mother, taken long before she taught me how to read contracts and trust silence. From a drawer, I took out the original office key. The metal was worn smooth, warm from my hand. It did not open anything anymore. That was the point. I hung it there anyway. Not as a trophy, not as a warning, as a reminder. There are people who believe power is loud, that it announces itself with titles and speeches and applause. They are wrong. Power is quiet. Power reads the fine print. Power remembers who signed first. Power knows when to stop holding up a ceiling that was never meant to rest on one person's shoulders. I did not destroy a hospital. I did not ruin a family. I simply stopped being invisible. If there is a lesson here, it is not about revenge. It is about leverage, and about what happens when someone finally realizes they were never disposable at all.